Oh good, you're back. And so am I. My name is Gypsy. If you're new to this channel, I am your host here. And if you're not new, thank you for coming back to hang out with me because I missed you. Okay, today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I have not really been in my usual dark place in my mind that I feel like I just wander to naturally. While I'm in this mood, I thought that I would make a video that would sort of bust some myths about people like me while also giving you guys the opportunity to get to know me a little bit better. Like, I try to be as open as possible online, even though I don't give you guys like all my government information, of course. I'm not going to tell you my address, but I don't mind people knowing personal things about me because I've always been an open person. Most of the people that know me in person actually know a lot of this stuff already. I don't have any reason to sugarcoat things. I'm not really a sugarcoater, so I'm totally comfortable with people asking me like personal questions or things about my private life or things about my parenting, dating relationships, things like that. I have no problem with people asking me those questions, and anything that I can get away with talking about without necessarily like infringing on other people's privacy, I have no problem doing that. So today our topic is about stereotypes or myths that are associated with people who are biracial like myself, specifically Blasian people who are living in the United States or like a Western influenced country. And I think most of us here have that, not the same experience, but some of these things are like very familiar to us. We run into them a lot. And those of you who are watching who maybe know some Blasians or are a Blasian, tell me in the comments if there are things that I'm saying that you disagree with, because I know that everybody who is Blasian that I've run into in my life, they don't necessarily feel the same way about these things, but I'm just talking about how this stuff applies to myself specifically. So this is my true experience. Number one is that we cannot speak our non-dominant culture's language. This is definitely a stereotype. It's untrue. It's not like a blanket statement that all of us cannot speak another language. For me, Korean was my first language, and then I had to learn English, and I learned both languages through, I guess, like the osmosis process, just being exposed to it a lot, but I always spoke Korean better than I spoke English as a child. And most of my initial experiences in schooling were done in Korea with a lot of Korean teachers. I didn't go to school. Okay, so when I was starting school, kindergarten, which in Korea we call that 유치원, we started 유치원 with a Korean school, and it was a nightmare for me and my sister because we were in the same grade for some reason. My dad held me back one year and like made me and my sister start school together. So we should have been a grade apart, but we were in the same grade, and all the children that were in our U2N class were 100% Korean kids, at least outwardly. So we did not blend in with our classmates. And at that time in Korea, which was, I think, like the early 90s, racism was very bad in Korea towards mixed people and non-Korean people. So yeah, we didn't get the best treatment at school from our classmates, and there was a lot of bullying going on. And me and my sister would come home miserable every day, like crying because the kids would make fun of us just because we were darker than them. That's the only reason. There was no other reason. Everything else about us was Korean like them, but we just didn't look like them. And they were ignorant, and their parents were ignorant, and nobody taught those children that they shouldn't behave that way towards other human beings. Like, you would think these things would be a given, but guys, after centuries of being populated on this planet, it's amazing how like barbaric some people's traditions are when it comes to dealing with people outside of their own racial makeup. When you go to these homogenous countries, it's bad in America too, but it's a different level of bad in some of these other countries. So for me, sadly, in Korea at that time, that was the case. Now I'm so happy to see there are very overtly mixed children on Korean television shows that little kids watch, and they're fluent in Korean like me and my sister were, and they're like the stars of these shows now, and we're being represented. I still have yet to run into a show where I've seen a Blasian kid, like Black and Korean mix, but a lot of them are more like Korean and Hispanic mixes, Korean and European mixes, and Korean and other Asian mixes. That's still progress, and if you guys know of any children that are being represented in mainstream Korean media that are Black and Korean, drop it in the comments because I'm very interested to check that out. I like for my daughter and my son to see that type of representation so that they can connect, because I raised them to identify with our culture. So for me, that was totally a myth. Number 2, which goes along with number 1, is that you cannot belong to both cultures equally. Like, you can't identify with both cultures equally. That's ridiculous. I mean, I think that comes a lot from Black and white mixed people in America tending to choose one or the other to pass for, and they kind of abandon the cultural associations of their other racial mix. So I think that just gets carried into every other mixed person's narrative here in the States. But for something like Black and Asian, it's such a contrast between the Black culture and the Asian culture that you can't accidentally blend the two. So if you do more of one or the other, like, it's really going to stand out. And for me, it has never been true that I pick one or the other to identify with more, because I don't identify with more on one or the other side. I think I fairly understand both perspectives and appreciate where they're coming from on both sides. But there's definitely things about Asian culture that I think is ridiculous, and I don't do that stuff. Even though I know about it and I educate my kids on it, I don't agree with it, so I don't do that stuff. And I feel like definitely a lot of things with the Black culture that's just backwards, and I don't think that that's due to Black people just not wanting to be productive. I think it has a lot to do with institutionalized racism in America, and just this continual narrative geared towards the Black community to make us feel inferior to everybody else, not just to white people, to everybody else in America. It's like everyone else comes first and then Black people, if you even count them at all. So that builds up resentment over the years of populations of people that are constantly being written off by their own country. And I can understand why a lot of Black people choose to do things a certain way that we might look at on the outside and say that's harmful to your life to move like that. But I get why they do it. So, like grooming my hair, I definitely follow the Black regimen when it comes to handling my hair and my daughter's hair, my son's hair, because we have more of our Black genes that affect our hair texture. So I cannot care for our hair the way that Korean people would. Like, Koreans, they can wash their hair every single day and it's not going to affect them negatively. But Black people, we don't do that. We can't do that because our pH, makeup, our hair, our scalp, everything is different from how Korean people's hair texture and their skin is. So because I have more of those genes that are dominant for me, I can't help but groom my hair the way that Black people do. For example, housekeeping, that kind of stuff, I normally follow my Korean side's regimen because Korean people are very meticulous about the way that they clean their homes, and they don't wear shoes in their house. And I know that seems like such a basic thing, but I've grown up my entire life not wearing shoes in my house. So I don't even feel comfortable wearing shoes in other people's homes when I visit them. And if I can get away with it, I'll take my shoes off. At my Black family's houses, I've always taken my shoes off. And for the most part, my Black side of the family, they don't wear shoes in their house, but they're not gonna knock you if you do. There's not a rule that says you have to take your shoes off when you come to their houses. But at my Korean family's house, yes, there is a rule. Absolutely. It's without a shadow of a doubt, even when strangers come to visit, no, you guys have to take your shoes off at the door. The time that you're walking around in your house with your shoes on, you're spreading disgusting germs. And we're in a pandemic right now. I don't understand why people are more concerned about wearing face masks and being 6 feet apart from each other, but they're just walking around in their house, touching stuff and doing stuff and putting things on their dirty floors. They don't care about that, but somehow we should be wearing masks because that's gonna somehow stop a pandemic from spreading. Like, hello, common sense. A big myth for us is that we only inherit good traits from each culture's side, like in our DNA or whatever. And that's not true. Like, people say that, like, if you're half black, then you must know how to dance. You must have a nice body shape. You must have, you must be really strong. If you're a guy, then I don't know, you got a big dick. I don't know. But like, and then they'll say like, oh, from your Asian side, you inherited your intelligence. You inherited your, submissiveness. If you're a female, if you're a guy, they'll say you inherited, you know, being really smart, being like a good business person or something like that. None of that is true. I did inherit some good traits from either side, but like negative things I've inherited is, for example, on my black side, I have a lot of family members with health problems. And I feel like I inherited a lot of those health issues that came from my dad's side of the family. There's like, I don't know, it's like 50-50. People say that you can inherit diabetic traits from your family members who already had it. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I don't know if that's a hereditary disease, but I think you're just more susceptible to having exposure to those diseases because culturally on the black side, we have a habit of eating certain kinds of foods that contribute to diabetes, high blood pressure, just bad health in general. And it's a more cultural thing and less a DNA thing. So, you know, that's kind of up for a debate. But if you want to argue, you know, semantics, if you want to argue, you could say that, yeah, that's something that I picked up from my black side, the way that I eat certain kinds of foods that I consider like soul food or like down south food because my family's from the south. I did grow up on that stuff because my dad loved that stuff and that's what his mother used to make him. So when we would eat American food, that was the kind of foods that we were eating. So that alone definitely busts that myth for me. And then from my Korean side, I think that I did inherit some negative things from that side as well. Oh yes, for years, I was extremely overly polite to the point where I was almost being really passive. And I did not think that it was appropriate for me to assert myself or to stand up for myself a lot of times because my Korean family like trained me from a young age to be very polite and respectful and to place myself beneath, authority-wise, beneath anyone who's older than me. So because I grew up with that mentality, I kind of naturally just treat everybody that way, even if they're not Asian people, but more when it's Asian people. But when it's not Asian people, like I will still go out of my way to try to be polite and like not do things or say things that I think that the other person might be offended by. But it was to the point where it was costing myself comfort. I was like sacrificing my own rights and my own comfort to make other people comfortable. And that became a problem later in my adult years because I'm not in Korea. This is America and people are fucking assholes around here and selfish and they don't give a damn if you're being nice. Like Americans, they will walk all over you if they think they can get away with it. So I had to learn like to not do that all the time. I had to figure out the proper times when it's okay to be overly polite, overly nice, and it's not going to negatively affect my life versus just letting people walk all over me. You feel me? So, you know, that's definitely something that I picked up from my Korean side. Next myth is that all of the talents that you possess as a Blasian person comes from your black side. Like if you can sing, it's because you black. If you can dance, that's because you black. If you can draw, it's because you black. If you are pretty, it's because you black. Like they will say everything that is like a talent, you know, if you're artistic, it's because you're black. And there's a lot of association put with visual and performing arts, talents, sports with black people. I understand where that stereotype comes from because some of the best, most talented, most famous artists and athletes happen to be black people. So I totally get that. But at the same time, it's like, well, other races of people have those same talents and, you know, traits too. It's not like only black people have that. It's just a coincidence that I happen to be mixed with black, you know? But if I was like white and Korean, I don't think people would be like, oh yeah, you're a good singer because you're white. Like, That doesn't happen. You feel me? I know it's a stereotype associated with being black because that's the race that gets the most credit for the talents that I have. But the reason why I know that that's not true is because my mom's side of the family, my mother herself is a artist. So my son being as good at drawing as he is, it's not just because the black side of his family can draw. It's also because his grandmother, who's my mom, who's Korean, she was an artist too. My grandmother was an artist on my mom's side. My grandfather, my mom's biological dad, he died when she was 3, so we never got to like meet him or, you know, get to know him. But I know my mother talks about him sometimes, and she told me that he was actually a guitar player and a singer. He was a vocalist. It's not really like, even if nobody on my dad's side of the family had any artistic traits, we probably still would have ended up being very artistic and being performers, because on my mother's side, she had parents that were artists and performing artists. K-pop didn't just get big because here in America people found out about it. Like, K-pop was already big in Asia before y'all even knew anything about Gangnam Style or none of that stuff. So those people that are performing, they're not faking it. I mean, they're really actually talented people, and they're Korean. 100% Korean people, most of them. So how do you explain that? How are they so good at dancing hip hop or like rapping or doing anything that are predominantly associated with black people? How could they be good at doing that stuff when they're not black? That's because they just have talent. That's it. That's the only reason why. So you're not necessarily going to find Blasian people who just have a mob of Blasian friends. That's one of the sad things about being a Korean Blasian, is that it's a lonely existence for some of us as far as trying to relate to people in a racial, cultural way, who are mixed like us. I do have Korean friends who are like full Korean. I have quite a few. And I do have lots of black friends, but not the combination of the two together, which is really sad. So that's probably part of the reason why I was always very close to my little sister, because we're only like a year and a half apart, and she's just like me. She's half black, half Korean, and she speaks fluent Korean, and you know, she's the only other person that has lived my existence and my experience and kind of even gets an idea of what it is that I go through when it comes to dealing with being biracial, like in this way. Going along with that myth is this stereotype that we get along with all other Blasian people. That's not true either. There's a lot of Blasian people who I don't like because they're really uppity. They're really like full of themselves and almost condescending towards other people. I think that's from getting a lot of attention from non-mixed people who are always like wondering what we're mixed with and admiring us for our beauty, I guess. But especially the females, I know a lot of Blasian females who they just get on my nerves. Like, I just think they're uppity and stuck up, and they get on my nerves. And half of them don't even speak Korean, so I don't understand why they act like they're like better than everybody else. But it's almost like in my situation, they don't get along with me because they almost look at me like a threat when they realize that I can speak fluent Korean and read and write it. Like, it makes them feel some type of way that they don't know their language. And it's almost like a lot of them will blame their parents and say that it's their parents' fault that they don't know their language because they never taught them. But I don't know how much you can really blame your family for that stuff, because it also comes with your attitude. Like, my mother, she had a rule where we were not allowed to speak English in our home ever. Like, she just didn't want to hear English being spoken in the house. And this is even after my dad died, because my father was very adamant about us knowing our culture, and he didn't want us to just be, you know, brainwashed by our Americanness to think that being American was the end all. So having had a taste of the cultural difference in Korea, living there and stuff, my dad really valued the fact that my sister and I were half Korean. He made sure that we had a relationship with our Korean side of the family, which to this day we still have. And he was very strict about making sure that my mother would speak only Korean to us so that we wouldn't lose our culture and our language no matter what country we were living in at the time. So that actually paid off. And like, when my father died, almost out of a sense of duty to my dad, my mom refused to let us speak English in the house. And we didn't like that back then. It bothered us because there were a lot of times where me and my sister would be talking, and like a lot of it was like in Ebonics. So for us to be trying to express ourselves ebonically in Korean, like, it didn't really work. But it paid off because we did not forget our language, and we can still communicate in our language with people who speak Korean. So I'm grateful for my mother being so strict about that, even though she was so getting on our nerves at the time. If you actively choose to ignore the fact that you could be speaking your language, but you just choose not to do it, well, then it's your own fault that you don't know your language. Your brain is just already like trained to pick up the English, but the Korean, that's not a given. So you should speak Korean to your children at home if you're able to do that. And if your spouse is like getting an attitude about you speaking your language to your kids, you need to reevaluate that relationship, because what kind of nonsense is that? Like, why did you marry me if you don't like the fact that I'm Korean? What was the point of that? You could have just married another American person. Like, that's stupid. And I've run into people so many times who are mixed, it's normally with white dads and Korean moms, but the children don't feel that their fathers are welcoming about their Korean heritage, and it's almost like they're trying to like breed it out of them almost. So they won't let their mom speak Korean to them, and a lot of times the excuse will be that the mother needs to learn more English, so she's practicing with the child. It's just, the whole logic is ridiculous to me. I don't get it. It just seems like excuses to not speak Korean. That's really how it feels to me. But I don't know. I just feel like if you have the opportunity to, you should. And my son, he has been taking more of an interest in learning Korean. So he taught himself how to read Hangul, and he can read it now. And like, he watches almost all Korean drama shows on TV and listens to a lot of Korean music. And he's like picking up the lyrics from listening to music and getting more comfortable saying the words. So his own interest in the Korean is what's helping him to learn Korean better. Even if I was just drilling it into his head all the time, it might not have necessarily stuck if he just didn't have an interest in it, you know? And I actually know a girl who's half white and Korean who didn't learn Korean until she got to college, and she ended up marrying a full Korean guy, and she speaks pretty much fluent Korean now, but she totally taught herself. Like, her mom was one of these moms who was like, oh no, I need to learn more English. So she kept speaking English to all her kids. And I was amazed. I was like, what? You can do that? You can learn it as an adult and sound this good speaking it? Like, I didn't know that, you know? For those of you who are thinking like, oh, it's too late. No, it's not too late to learn any language, really. But if it's your own cultural language, you should own that. You should want to know it. Another myth is that we only date people that are from one of our races. So like, I'm only interested in dating Korean guys, or I only want to date black guys. Not true. I think that I've been attracted to almost every race of guy. Like, it doesn't matter what the race is. And I feel like I'm more attracted to mixed guys physically. But that's just because I see myself in them, you know? In fact, I feel like because I'm mixed, I feel sometimes more drawn to people who are a totally different race from me. Like, they're Hispanic, or they're a different type of Asian, or like Arab, or like, I don't know, just completely different races of people, because it intrigues me to learn about other cultures and the way people do things in those cultures, to get exposure to those other languages. I love that. And like, I would love to have children that were a part of all these different races, so they can feel more of a connection to these different groups and learn from those other cultures, because I do feel like being multiracial really enriches your life if you can find a way to connect to your different races. There's a stereotype that sometimes we are ashamed of one of our races and that we'll try to like hide it from people. This one, I do think that there is this going around within the Blasian community, but mostly because there's other people who are racist, pretty much. Like, for me, this isn't true. For my sister, I don't know, I can't really speak for my sister, because sometimes she'll like get into this rant about how like being Korean doesn't help her in any way. So she's not going out of her way to like speak the language or do anything to connect to our culture. But I think that has more to do with her strange experiences that she's had in one of the towns that we've lived in, where the people in that town, they're predominantly black, they're really ignorant, and they have always treated us like we were beneath them because we were mixed. So I think that comes from that mostly, but not because she just feels like that in general. So it really depends. But like I said, it's because other people's racism that makes us sometimes feel like we have to hide one of our races in order to survive in our environment. But for me, because my Asperger's, I've never really gave a shit what other people think about me. So for me, this is not true. But sadly, for some people, this is true, and I wish that it wasn't. I wish I could encourage and empower more Blasian people to not feel like they have to hide one of their races from, being like recognized, I guess. And like sometimes when I'm around Korean people who are like super ignorant, they'll say things to almost make it feel like, I don't think they're trying to diss me, but I don't think they realize that what they're saying sounds like a diss. Like my own grandmother, she said to me one day, she was like, "Oh, your dad was really awesome. He's one of my favorite son-in-laws." My dad is the only non-Korean son-in-law that my grandmother has. So at first I was like, "Oh, that's great that you liked my dad." Then she like switched up and said, "Yeah, and he really wasn't that dark." Oh my God, thank goodness I have a sense of humor. I was like, "What?" She was like, "Your father wasn't that dark." I was like, okay, what does that have to do with whether you like him or not? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that why you liked him? Because he wasn't that dark in your opinion? Like, if he was darker, would you have not liked him? I don't get that. Like, I really don't get that. And then when she saw my kids, who are her great-grandchildren, she like made a comment about how they weren't that darkly complected. And she was like, "Wow, I can't believe that they're mostly black because they're a quarter Korean." She's like, "They're mostly black, but they're not that dark." And I was like, honey, like, black people come in different colors. I was like, "Did you know that? Like, we're not all just one shade of brown. You know that, right? Like, there's different colors of black people who are full black." And she was like, "Oh, that's nice. Well, anyways, they're not that dark, so that's good." Like, she would say things like that. She obviously wasn't trying to diss me, you guys, but she didn't know any better. And like, that kind of stuff happens a lot to people who are mixed like us. One side will say, "Oh, wow, you're not as weird as I thought you'd be because you're part of this other nationality." And you're like, "Thanks, I don't, what?" Like, you don't know how to react, Okay, there's this misconception that we will get really offended if you ask us about our races. Like, you ask us, "Hey, what are you mixed with?" People sometimes think we're going to get mad, so they'll start with, "I'm not trying to be rude. Oh, I'm not a racist or anything." Well, it doesn't matter what your answer is, but I'm just curious. Can you tell me what you're mixed with? And like, I always like think that's weird when people start off that way, because I'm like, why the fuck would anybody be upset because you ask them what race they are, right? But that happened to me. I asked somebody who looked mixed what race they were, and they got so upset that I asked them that, and they were like, "What does it matter what race I am?" And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, calm the hell down. You know what I'm saying? I ask white people what race they are. I really do. Like, if you're white and you have like lots of freckles or like a different kind of hair texture, like it's really, really curly or something, I will come and ask you. I'll be like, "Hey, are you Italian? Are you like mixed with something? Where do you get this curly hair from?" Like, I will ask them, you know what I'm saying? But that's because I'm fascinated with how you look. Something about you looks unique or different or beautiful. It's a positive reason why I'm asking you. But because in America we have such horrible race relations here, thank you, white people, everyone else has to suffer for it now. You know what I'm saying? I'm not like that. I'm not that uptight. You don't know me. I feel like this. If you were really asking for a racist reason, you wouldn't bother asking me. That's the whole thing about racists. They're fucking ignorant. They don't know what the hell's going on. They wouldn't take the time to even question what race you were. They would just look at you, decide that you're somehow beneath them because of your skin color, and just treat you like shit. That's what racists do. Why would you just assume that I'm asking you for some offensive reason what race you are? Like, is that what you've been experiencing from people all this time? That's stupid. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. You're being too goddamn sensitive. Relax. Like, the first thing shouldn't be it's a negative reason they asked me. No, the first reason should be it's probably a good reason why they're asking me. Let me assume they're trying to be, positive in some way. And then after you answer the person, then decide if their reaction is like weird and racist. If they're not, they're just making conversation. Calm the fuck down, There's a myth that people who are Blasians do not identify as any race, that we don't consider ourselves black or Asian. We're just nothing because we can't relate enough to one or the other. So not true. I definitely identify as Blasian, okay? I'm black and I'm Asian, and I'm specifically black and Korean, thank you. And I'm totally proud of my both sides of my family. I'm very proud to belong to both. That, like on each side, we have still other races that like contributed to our racial makeup, but because the percentage of those racial contributions are so low, I don't really like mention it when I'm talking to people. You know, like Tiger Woods, he wants you to know I'm black, I'm white, I'm Asian and Native American, bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like, he be representing everything. But if I did that, it would be like 80 different races I'd have to talk about. So, and I think on my dad's side, we're also mixed partly with some kind of white. So like, it's too much. You know what I'm saying? I'm really a mutt, but my predominant cultures that influence my life is my black culture and my Korean culture. So that's what you're normally going to hear me identify as when I say that I'm Blasian. Yeah, I don't know how you can identify as nothing. Like, how? Unless you were adopted and you weren't raised around either one of those races, which I know some people have actually had that experience because, unfortunately, because Koreans were freaking racist for many, many years, if you got accidentally pregnant as a Korean woman by a black soldier's baby or something like that, a lot of those women threw their babies in the garbage can. They literally just dropped them at the doorstep of some orphanage and ran away and like tried to just put it behind them because it was so taboo at that time for you to be a single mother and be a single mother to a black baby. Like, what the hell is going on, right? So so sadly, there are some Korean black people who have just got stuck in the orphanage system and then maybe got adopted out to an American family, and maybe that family's white, I don't know. And white people, for whatever reason, it seems like when they adopt children from other cultures, they really try hard to assimilate those kids into their whiteness. So maybe because you're like, I know I'm not white, bitch. Like, there's nobody's mistaking me for white. Maybe you feel like you don't really belong anywhere. And so for those people, I think that is the exception. But if you have been raised by one of your biological parents, I don't think that people who are Blasians just generally don't relate to either culture and they just decide, well, I'm nothing. You know, I think I met one other person who was like that, who probably wasn't adopted, which is my high school chemistry teacher, Mr. Moby John. Those of you who know me from high school remember him. Oh my God, he was so weird. Anyway, so Mr. Moby John, he had like a really weird look, and you could tell when you looked at him, he was mixed with something. He had brown skin, like a shade darker than mine, and he had really straight kind of like texture hair, but it was like thick, like Indian men hair, you know? Asian Indian, not Native American Indian. But yeah, so he had like thick, like glossy hair, and he was mad brolic, like just built for no reason, but he was a chemistry nerd, okay? So weird looking. And like, I remember one time I like asked him, I was like, Mr. Moby John, like, what are you mixed with? Because I know you are. I know you mixed. I know us when I see us, okay? He like refused to tell me what he was mixed with. He was almost acting like he doesn't belong to any race. Like, that's how he was talking about himself, real vague, and telling me, insisting that I have an identity crisis going on because I don't know who I am, because I can't pick a side between my Korean or black races. My teacher said this to me, and I was like, are you on crack cocaine? What the fuck are you talking about? I was like, I'm very relatable to both of my races. I'm mixed. I'm Blasian. I'm both. I speak Korean. I speak English. Like, I'm chilling. What you talking about? My mom is Korean. When I go home to Korea. What is you talking about, Mr. Moby John? Like, how does that even make any sense? But he kept insisting that I was confused and that had something to do with why I never participated in his class. No, it's because chemistry bores me and I don't understand it and I'm not interested. That's why I'm not. It has nothing to do with my racial identity crisis. Can you guys believe, like, these are actual conversations that I had with real human beings in my lifetime. Like, I'm alive right now while you guys are watching this. I'm alive right now. And that happened to me. What? Yo, I ain't making this stuff up. Okay, so here's another big stereotype. This one actually comes to us from the predominantly black community. So it's not like a universal, just everyone thinks it's about us. Usually it's black people specifically that think that we think we are better than them because we're mixed with something else. It's a huge belief in the black like narrative that people who are at least part white try to represent their whiteness more because it gets them more perks in life. And so if you could pass for white, then you would take that opportunity at a glance, at a jump, because you trying to move up in life, you know? I understand that that has been true for some people, and that I could see why Black people think that about mixed people. But I promise you, Black people, as a Blasian specifically, not Black and white, I mean, a Black and Asian person, this is not true. I do not think I'm better than you because I'm half Korean. No, I don't. In fact, because I'm half Korean and I have an understanding of what it's like to be proud of your heritage, to have patriotism for your country and for your people's way of doing things, your culture, and feeling a strong sense of identifying with that culture, it actually motivates me as a Black person to represent my Blackness even stronger, because I know what it's like to be proud of your heritage no matter what anybody else thinks about it. It doesn't matter if anyone else recognizes Korea as anything. Koreans are proud to be Korean. I have yet to run into a Korean person who's like ashamed of their Koreanness, or don't like that they're Korean, or they're trying to like hide the fact that they're Korean. Like, no, I've never run into that, and I doubt I ever will. For the most part, most Korean people you run into, young or old, we are proud of our Korean culture, man. And that sense of empowerment that I feel when I think about my Korean heritage, I really would love for Black people to have that same sense of belonging and proudness and patriotism for their racial identity. And that is, it's difficult in America now to really have that in the pure sense of that, because we are so watered down here as far as like having a culture. We don't really have a Black culture. A lot of the things that we try to incorporate into the culture, we borrowed from somewhere else. So, you know, Black people are like one of the few races of people that if you run into them somewhere, even here in America amongst other Black people, the only thing that keeps us identifying with each other is our skin color. That's it. We don't know, like your family, you guys watching this now who are Black, your family and my Black family, we may not have even come from the same area of Africa, if you can even trace your family back to Africa. A lot of Black Americans, I don't even think that they're like purely African descendants. I think a lot of them were already here. They were Native Americans. I look at the Native Americans like some mixture of the ancient Africans who were traveling outside of Africa, because they were, and the ancient Asians who walked across the, what is that thing called? The Bering Strait, or there's some kind of like landmass that used to exist that connected America and Asia. And people that were exploring at that time were being sent out by different empires to explore, to conquest, you know what I'm saying? But some of those people, they never went back. They just mixed and mingled with the people that they ran into in this new land, and then they just stayed there and created their own cultures. So I think that's how we ended up with a lot of the Native American tribes that are here in the United States that are indigenous to Americas. Over years and years and years, centuries of these people mixing with each other. And that's why you can find so many people in Africa that look physically resemble a lot of people from the Native American tribes. And also, if you do like a DNA test for people who are predominantly Native American, a lot of their DNA will get traced back to Asia. Like it'll come up as like Pan-Asian or like some kind of Asian, right? So I think that's where that comes from. It's just a theory, but it makes sense to me. But whatever the case is, I don't know if there's like proof that shows this, but I'm just saying, guys, it's a little uncanny that most Black people here, when they do trace back their lineage, a lot of it stops right at some Native American tribe. Like a lot of Black people know family members who are full-blood Cherokee, but they can't figure out what part of Africa those people further back in their family come from. You see what I'm saying? So where'd you get a Cherokee from in your family line that you can trace, but you can't figure out what part of Africa your family is from? You see what I'm saying? So that's not a coincidence, and these white people are not going to tell us that officially this stuff could be true, because then that's too much empowerment, and we would be, you know, we would have too much to stand on if we could like confirm this. Even people who could confirm their races back to Africa, I feel like when you know what part of Africa you're from, you can represent that. Like my friend Roxy, who she's Ivorian. She's from West Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire is her country, but it used to be called Ivory Coast. So there, my friend, even though she speaks French as her like first language or whatever, because that's what most people there speak, she also has like tribal languages for her people that are from there. That's just an indigenous language that's for the people that are part of these tribes. And she can identify with that stuff, and she's grown up in America. She's very Americanized, but at the same time, she has her African ways. And, she has her just things about her that probably black people would look at and think is unusual, but like, that's how her people do things. So like her and her family, when I used to go to their house and like be around them, I really got a lot out of watching them interact with each other and like the way that they did things, because it was so different from the way that I've seen black people in America do things. But they're black. You see what I'm saying? So it's so important, I think, as black people, for us to not dismiss ourselves and just be satisfied with what the world is telling us that we are. And my Korean heritage really taught me that it's important for me to not just be uninterested in my black side and like be okay with having no explanation for what kind of black we are. Like, that bothers me. I want to know more about my black side of the family and our racial makeup, our racial identities. It's not accurate, and we don't think we're better than you full black people just because we're mixed. We don't think that. It's sad, because I think that there are some Blasian people who do have this air about them where they're like really stuck up. They really will act like they're so amazing because they're half Asian. Meanwhile, they don't know anything about their Asian culture. They don't speak the language. They don't know how to make any of the food. Like, they know very, very little about their Asian culture, to the point where you might as well just not even be Asian. Like, they're just as clueless about their Asian side as they are about their black side. But because they're mixed and they have the physical attributes of being a Blasian person, they'll almost come off very like high sedity. And I freaking hate it when I run into those Blasian people, because they are making us look bad. You know what I'm saying? But as far as somebody who is connected to both of my cultures, no, I don't think that my Koreanness makes me any better than a full-blooded black person. I really don't. I just have a different understanding of my racial makeup on either side, which I think being Korean gave to me. Okay, and stemming from that last bit that I was talking about, something else that we really get a lot is that and this is part of the reason why I think a lot of black people think we're better than them. There's a misunderstanding about how our complexion almost protects us from racism, and because some of us are lighter in skin tone or have better like features, I guess, I don't know, black people will say that this is good hair, like, you got that good hair. They will say that to me, you know what I'm saying? But this is not my natural hair texture, you guys. Like, I have to relax my hair to get it like this. I gotta straighten it with a straightening iron to get it like this. Most of the previous videos where you guys see me talking, my hair is like super curly. That is my actual hair texture. So no, I don't have good hair. You know what I'm saying? Like, my hair be stressing me out. Like, it's not kinky, but for me, it's difficult for me to deal with my own hair texture in its natural state. It's constantly fighting with itself because I don't have a curl pattern. It's not true that we don't go through racial discrimination because we're mixed. I think people think that about us, especially black people think that about us, that we don't understand their plight. Like Paul Mooney, when I hear his jokes, sometimes I'll be thinking like, he'll talk as if he thinks that people who are not black just can't understand what black people are going through when we're dealing with especially institutional racism, where it's like very systemic, it's very sly, it's very subtle, and it's not overtly just in your face racist behaviors. But you as a black person going through that know that it is racist. What they're doing to you, it stems from the fact that you're black. Like, you know it. You know how to recognize that, but you can't prove it. That's the worst kind of racism, I think, because they'll have you thinking you're crazy. But you know you're not. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand where he's coming from when he has these bitter feelings about how that Black plight is difficult for people to understand outside of our race. But we Blasians we're not exempt from that just because we have a lighter complexion. That would be the same thing as telling someone who is full Black on both sides that happens to be light-skinned that their existence is somehow easier because they're light-skinned. And there is that stereotype in the Black community that exists, which helps to further separate us from each other when we should be more united. And I think that's wrong. I think that you guys should try to open up your mind to how racism does affect us, but it affects us in maybe a little bit different way than it does to you guys. And it doesn't manifest in the same way, but we still experience that. Korean people, they almost never think that I'm Korean at all. Not even like a drop. They never just guess when they see me, oh, she's probably Korean. Ever. When they first meet me and they can't tell what race I am, I've had a lot of experiences where Korean people were being very rude to me and very just treating me poorly because they thought that I was Black. I know you guys were Americans who are watching this going, they thought you're Black. What? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you didn't tell me you were Black, I wouldn't know. I know, but they're not really exposed to all of the different races of people, these guys that do this to me. So they just think if you're not Asian, then you must be Black if you have brown skin at all. So it doesn't occur to them that there's other races of people that also have brown skin. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, especially when my hair's curly, they'll just see my hair texture, they'll see my skin tone, and automatically think I'm Black, and then they'll just treat me like shit. And then soon as they figure out I'm not really full Black, that I am part Korean, they slowly start to act differently towards me, and they become more like positive in their behaviors and their speech pattern. They get a little bit less assholey, I guess. And they think they slick, like they think I don't notice. Yes, I do, but I just don't acknowledge it because I'm not gonna give you that much power over me to make you feel like you were somehow able to affect my mood, because I don't give a shit. But at the end of the day, it's like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Just treat everybody the same. Then you don't have to worry about that. I don't want people to even accidentally perceive me to be a racist. Like, why would you be okay with this? But people are like that because they're ignorant. Yeah, so I've had to deal with racism from my own race a lot of times because they mistake me for just being a full Black person. And then I've also had people who are American people, the white people around me, you know, like at work. I get a lot of this at work. White women, for some reason, and guys, I have a lot of white female friends, so I don't know why this happens to me, because the white friends I have, I get along with so good. Like, I love them girls. I love them. They're like amazing. But these white women that I run into at work who end up, I guess they look at me as competition, they be just showing their asses so fucking much at how intimidated they are of me. I think it's not that I'm Black that they get intimidated by. It's that I'm Black and I'm smart. That's what really scares them. I'm smart. I'm smarter than they are. And they know that I'm smart. I'm not doing a good job of hiding how smart I am. When they pick up on that, they find me very, very intimidating, very much of a threat. They think I'm going to take over their positions. This is usually people who are like in the management brackets at work. They really think that I'm like next in line to take over their jobs. But bitch, I don't want your fucking job, because if I wanted it, I would have just applied for that job off the rip. I didn't get qualified. I was qualified. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to be the person responsible for everything going on here. And then when shit goes wrong, I get blamed. I'm good for an extra $1, an extra $2. That's not worth it to me. You know what I'm saying? But I'm smart enough to know that it's not that serious at these jobs. And it's almost like they don't believe that I feel that way. They just think because I do a good job, I'm an innovative thinker, because I do things outside the box and still get the job done. I'm working at a pace that's faster than they are. I'm producing faster than they are because I'm a corner cutter, you guys. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I am a corner cutter. I don't want to work harder. I want to work smarter. I don't want to waste my time doing something that I could have done in half the time. So because my mind is always trying to figure out the shortcut way of doing things, once I figure it out, I just stick to it and I will keep doing it. And those women that see me doing that really makes them pissed, because they're like, why didn't I think of that? Why am I over here working my ass off and she's done? what's going on? And then it looks like when their bosses like happen to see me and they're talking to me, I'm getting a lot of attention from those bosses because they see the potential in me. But again, joke's on you. I'm not interested. I don't want to move up. I don't want to be the manager. I don't want to run stuff. I don't want to do that. I just want to be left alone so I can finish my task and go home. Thank you. But I can't explain all of that at work to these people. You know what I'm saying? So that can be a problem for me. And so in those situations, I am dealing with discrimination from these people, because if I was a white girl acting like that, which I've seen other white girls who are just as smart as I am, they don't get offended by those girls. They don't get scared of those girls. It totally flies under the radar. And then same thing when I go into a job and just straight up play dumb. Like I will deliberately play dumb at a lot of jobs because I don't want to run into this shit all the fucking time. It's like, I can last at that job as long as nobody knows I'm smart. But as soon as they figure it out, then it's like my days are numbered. You know what I'm saying? They'll find some reason. They'll find some way to like run me off. So when I run into these people and I'm playing dumb, even though they know I'm black, they don't overtly seem as threatened by me. They almost act like they pity me, like they're trying to help me. They'll give me information that I didn't even ask for because I'm not a threat to them. There's no chance of me taking over and doing anything. But as soon as they figure it out the window, bye gypsy. Here's a silly stereotype that we have, which is that we have automatic dual citizenship from America and whatever Asian nationality we are. Not true. Wish it was, but it ain't true. Turns out, at least for Korean people, you have to choose at 21 years old whether or not you want to give up one of your citizenships or become a dual citizen. I didn't know that. If I knew that before I had turned 21, I would have totally done it. I would have got both. But no, I didn't know. So for those of you who are watching this that may be wondering about this or think that this may be useful information to you, if you are half Korean, if you're not 21 years old yet, please look into how you can get dual citizenship with the help of your Korean parents, I presume. You have to prove, obviously, that you're Korean in order to do that, but there's a way. So find out what that way is way ahead of time so you guys can get the ball rolling, because if you can have dual citizenship, I don't see what the downside is of having it. You never know. Like, look at this nonsense that's going on now with this pandemic and the election, all this bull crap. If I had the option of hightailing it back to Korea and just living there, like I so would have did that already, but I didn't do that. Okay, another misconception we have is that we are generally accepted by both of the races we belong to. Totally not true. And it really hurts me sometimes to admit that this stuff doesn't apply to us always in a positive way. I have not been just accepted by the black community in general, especially during my childhood. No. A lot of the problems that I had with people from the black community as a teenager was due to the fact that I was half something else. And it was usually girls who were very threatened by myself and my sister because they perceived us to be physically more attractive than they were, and they looked at us like very high competition for the attention of boys. So stupid. I don't think that we were better looking than them. I think a lot of those girls were really pretty. They all had like, their bodies came in before we did. We were like stick figures when those girls had grown woman bodies. And even now, like I'm thicker now, but it's because I got fat, not because I'm just juicy like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, damn, I gotta be fat in order to be juicy. Like, that should not be the option. You feel me? But black girls don't really have to worry about that, because a lot of the girls that just have these voluptuous body types, like my friend Roxy, they just born like that. It's just in their genes. They didn't, like, cause themselves to look that way. And, like, they didn't have to gain weight in order to become sexier. Like, that's not how that works for them. It's just natural. And own it, bitch. Like, what the fuck is you mad at me for? Because my hair is a little bit straighter than yours. What's wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? But I've had to deal with that a lot from black girls who were super intimidated of us and just assumed that we were going to have more attention than they did because of the way that we looked. Here's the thing. I did get a lot of attention from guys when I was younger, but not because I was not black. Like, that's not why. Black men liked me mostly because I was nice. That's it. My personality. I was a nice girl. I didn't have an attitude. I did not have an attitude. It wasn't cool the way that I was brought up to just always have a stank ass attitude. Always seem like you ready to fight somebody. I wasn't raised like that. And I just didn't carry myself like that because that's not who I am. So that, I think, was a breath of fresh air for a lot of these guys who just was constantly having to deal with girls giving them a hard time just because they're guys. Like, for no other reason than, oh, he trying to holler at me. Who he think he is? We just never was like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were the girls that, like, this is so stupid now when I think about it because it's dangerous potentially. But we were just naive and, like, we saw the best in people, you know, and I say we, I'm talking about me and my sister because we did everything together. So, like, we were the girls that, like, we were walking down the street, and if you saw us walking down the street and you, like, rode by us and said, hey, Shadi, you want to ride? Like, we'd be like, oh my God, that's so nice of you to offer us a ride. Wow, yeah, thanks. And we would get in the car and just go get a ride with somebody. Like, we did that all the time, you guys. That's crazy, right? Like, when we lived in New York, too, like, how could you... Oh my God, what were you thinking? I don't know, we weren't thinking. We didn't think about the dangers of doing that at that time. It was just, I don't know, it just didn't seem like scary, but I would never do that now, you know? That's crazy. But anyways, but we were those girls. Like, we were so happy-go-lucky, and like, we were always performing, we were always on stage. Everybody knew us for the girls who were at the talent show, the poetry reading, the play. Like, we were somehow connected to everything going on in our communities that had to do with performing arts. So we were used to people just always, like, recognizing us when we walked down the street, waving at us, talking to us. Everybody called us, like, these nicknames that they had for us because they didn't know our real names, but they knew who we were, you know? And then my mother, she had, like, a wig shop back then. So a lot of the Black people from town, the Black women, they knew my mom because they bought hair from her. So, like, they saw us in her store all the time, you know? So that was the reason why I think mostly that we got a lot of attention from guys, because we were just always out there and, like, recognizable, and we were approachable, we were friendly, and, like... Now I feel like I'm a lot more bitter than I was in my youth, because I'm just very jaded by things that I've seen as an adult. But before the real world's worries really, like, tainted us, we didn't have a care in the world. We were just like, yay, new friends, okay, you know what I'm saying? Crazy. But anyways, so a lot of those guys that tried to, like, holler at me back in the day are still my Facebook friends, and, like, we joke around with each other and talk to each other all the time. And I don't feel any differently about them now that I did back then. Like, they're still my homies. Like, I love them. But I guess you're not supposed to be like that if you're a girl. Or, like, I don't know. Is this, like, a trend in the Black female community where it's not okay to, like, be nice or something? I don't know. I don't know what that is. But it's not because we're cuter than y'all. Like, that's not why we were getting more attention. But sadly, that's what they thought. So they were always, like, attacking us, and they would, like, bully us and call us names. Like, they would call us, like, chink and stuff like that. Like, we were gonna be offended, and I'm like, why would that offend me? I'm not mad because you're calling me Chinese. Like, what? Why is that offensive? I don't understand that. How do you get offended because somebody calls you a race? That's, like, stupid. I don't know. Because the word chink is supposed to be derogatory, I guess. But to me, it's the same thing as white boys riding up next to you and then shouting out the door, nigger, before they run right off. Like, you're in a car. Like, that's kind of a punk ass move. And white boys have actually done that to me. The same girl who Black people think is not Black enough. White people have done that to me multiple times in my life. I never get offended when that happens. I always, like, laugh because I'm like, y'all stupid. You thought I was going to get mad because you did that? Like, you're a bitch ass punk. Why did you drive off? I'm a girl. It's nighttime. I'm out here by myself. Like, why did you drive away? You're supposed to scare me, right? I'm supposed to, like, why did you do that? That's how I looked at it when Black girls would call me chink. I'd be like, that's not a diss. Like, I don't understand. You just stated a fact. I'm Asian, so, like, what? Like, well, yeah, I'm supposed to be mad? Like, yeah, I eat with chopsticks. I am a chink. What? And so what? What's your problem? Anyway, yeah, so we got a lot of that. We got a lot of Black people reminding us over and over and over again that we weren't Black enough. On the other side of that also was that the Korean people. Korean people have never been accepting of us because we're mixed, and they look down on mixed people. The reason why they look down on us is not because we look different than them. It's mainly because they believe that if you mix races, naturally your children are going to be watered down racially, and then culturally your Korean heritage will die out of your genealogy. So they don't want that. They're very proud to be Koreans, like I stated before, and they want to keep their Koreanness going. And if we all die out, then where will Korea be? 300 years down the line, maybe it won't even exist. So because they want to prevent that from happening, that's the reason why they look down on people mixing cultures. But that doesn't make it any easier for us who are mixed to try to connect with them and like be friends with them and like be around them, because we do want to. Like, I know for me and my sister, this was always the case. Since moving to America from Korea, we've always been very nostalgic and homesick for our culture. And like, the only way to even get a piece of that was to be around Korean people, to hear the language, to, have access to the food and things like that. So when we would run into people who were Koreans, it was very valuable to us to keep them around. To this day, I have like emos. Emo means auntie in Korean. And even if somebody's not your biological aunt, if they're like at an age where they could be old enough to be your aunt, you just kind of just call them auntie if they're like a family friend. So I have a lot of aunties who are full Korean women that were kind of like surrogate auntie figures for me growing up through the church that we went to, and some unnies. Unnie just means big sister to a female. And I have some church unnies that, like, to this day, I still talk to them on Facebook. I miss them. If I could hang out with them, I totally would. They're the kinds of like people who I would like have around my kids. I trust them with my children. I got some guidance from those women, and they were always very kind to me and looked out for me. And one of them, shout out to my auntie, one of my friends who's half white and Korean, her mom, in fact, everybody in our town just automatically assumed that we were related to them because both our moms were Korean, and they were the only other half Korean family in that town. So they're like our like play cousins, But that family, the mom who lives in the same town as my sister, I haven't talked to her in like years, right? And I just like found her online or something. I don't even know. But I just asked her a favor, like, hey, can you go check on my sister? Because I haven't heard from her in a while. She didn't even hesitate. Like, that day, like, she sent her daughter to my sister's house to go check on her and make sure she was okay. And that to me is like invaluable, to have people like that in your life, especially people like that who also share your culture. Like, I'm typing her in Korean, and if I didn't have my language skills, then it would be harder for me to connect with these people who mean a lot to me, and they're very kind to me, So I appreciate that I'm able to do that. I wish more Korean people would be more accepting, but like I said, unless they are people who married Americans and had mixed children, most of the time they have not been that accepting of me. Usually when they find out that I speak Korean, then they kind of fall back a little bit. But I shouldn't have to just know my language in order to get respect out of you. I mean, I'm still Korean, whether I know my language or not. You know what I'm saying? So that bothers me. And I hope that the newer generations of Korean people will help to kill some of this, bad behavior that our elders kind of just went along with because they didn't know any better. I'm not mad at those people or anything, but it's a reality, and that I have to brace myself for that when I interact with Korean people now. But the younger generation, those of you who are the millennials, the people from my generation who have more exposure to international affairs and to mixed people, I remember running into a Korean guy at this laundromat one time, and him and his friend they were just like some college kids doing their laundry, and I heard them talking Korean to each other, And I was like, oh, you guys are Korean guys. What are you guys doing here? And they were like, oh, we're going to this college. We moved here from another state. We're going to this college in town. And how'd you know we were Korean? And I was like, because I'm Korean too. And then I like switched and started speaking Korean to them. They were like, oh, like they were like, I guess what some people would call the fobs. Like they were like from Korea, Koreans, you know, not like me. Like I'm like no, I'm a 1.5er. Yeah, they weren't 1.5ers like me. They were straight up like exchange students, you know. Korean was their stronger language, so I was switching and talking to them in Korean. And they were like so surprised and so impressed that they could communicate with me, but I wasn't full Korean. And I had lived in Korea. I mean, I had lived in America for most of my life. So they were fascinated, and I never got that kind of reaction from Korean people before. And like those guys, they were dressed like head to toe in like hip hop gear, and they were like blasting Korean hip hop rap music in their cars. And they were just like so excited to like see me, because they were like, oh my God, like we love rap. Like you're black, you're half black. Oh my God, like that's so amazing, right? And they were so impressed. And I was like, really? Like I never got that reaction. And I was like, wow, I'm surprised that you guys aren't more standoffish because I'm not full Korean. And one of the guys said to me, don't say that. Don't ever say that. I was like, but it's true. And he was like, no, no, no. You are Korean. You're more Korean than some full Korean people that we know. And I'm so like excited I ran into you. So he was like, that gives me so much hope for Koreans being able to mix with outside our race, because it is possible for us to be mixed and still have our culture. And like it's amazing that you can speak our language and that you can understand the song and like you like the music, and we're so excited to run into you, you know. And I was like really blown away from that experience. So that kind of taught me to not just assume that everyone's going to be standoffish when they run into me who are Korean people, but I wish we had more of that going around. And I don't remember those guys' names, and I probably will never like come across them again, but I am giving a shout out to all of the full Korean people who are totally down with the movement of, you know, expanding our horizons, even as we mix with other races, to not lose our culture and to be able to represent both and connect. And like, thank you guys for doing that, and thank people like you guys, like those guys who make it kind of their business to not make people like me feel uncomfortable or like we don't belong to the group because we don't look like y'all. That's totally refreshing and amazing. Last thing I want to talk about is this misconception that when you're a Blasian person, you automatically reap the benefits of being black. There is just a stereotype about black people in general, that we're the coolest person in the room, that we have the most swag, that we're the most popular people, that we are the most talented people. And sometimes when people know that you're mixed with black and anything, they just assume, oh, you must be like that, you know? But that's not true. We don't reap all the benefits of being black. I do have many talents, but it's not because I'm black. And I have never considered myself cool or popular, although there have been times in my life where I think I was popular or perceived by other people as cool, but like it wasn't because of my blackness. Like it wasn't because I'm part black, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying this in a way that makes sense, but that's not always true. Like you're not cooler because you're half black. You know what I mean? Like I've run into people who are black and Asian who were complete nerds. Like nothing about them was cool, and they weren't cool at all. Like they weren't, but that was their personality. They were nerdy people, and they were totally okay with that, you know? They didn't particularly have any like performing arts or artistic talents. They didn't necessarily dance that well. Like I can't dance. I'm part black. My sister can really dance. My sister can dance. Dance, okay? Like she like needs to be on like one of them dance shows, them contests, you know, she's that good. But she was just born with it. Like I don't know where she gets her dancing abilities from. I guess my dad had some rhythm. He was a drummer, but like he wasn't no professional dancer or anything. He wasn't like the dude with all the moves. But my sister when she was little, like when she was a little kid, everybody knew she could dance, and she can. So I'm not just like saying this because I'm like, oh, that's my sister, yo. I'm gonna give her props. No, like even when me and my sister ain't getting along, you never gonna hear me say that bitch can't dance. I was just being nice because no, she could dance. Okay, always envied that my sister could dance, but I couldn't, and me and her are the exact same mix. So like, why does she know how to dance but I don't? It don't got nothing to do with our blackness. The cool factor, yeah, I never thought I was anybody who was even remotely like could be mistaken as cool. I don't think so, because I was so straight laced. Like when I was a kid, I was the kid who was always trying to break up fights. I was the one that would like tell all the other kids like, hey guys, don't roughhouse. We can't play like this. Someone might get hurt. That was me. I was the kid that was like the mini teacher. Like I was always the one that was trying to make sure people were following the rules and they weren't getting hurt and they weren't making dumb kid decisions that would end up getting us in trouble. Like that was me. I was the kid that would tag along as the chaperone for my sister when she would want to go have fun and do things, and would actually be like a designated party goer. Like I wasn't participating in all of the stuff that everybody else was doing because I wanted to make sure that we were safe. That's so dorky. Like what? Oh, my poor sister. Yeah, that's the kind of big sister that I was, okay? And I still kind of am, but I'm a little bit less neurotic about it now because I'm an adult and I have seen so much stuff since then that I know like it's not that serious. You can't prevent everything from happening. Sometimes you gotta just fall back and have fun, and I get that now. But back then I was so paranoid about us doing anything that was gonna get us in trouble that I was always stepping in to stop things from happening because I didn't want us to get in trouble. That by far is not what the cool kids do, okay? But that was me. So like being black did not help me be more cool, not in my book. And a lot of the so-called friends that I had when I was a kid, if I really analyze it, like they're not my friends. They were my sister's friends. And because my sister and I were constantly around each other, people just bundled us together. So they associated myself as part of their friend circles, but they weren't really my friends. Like I don't keep in touch with those people now, but my sister still talks to them, sees them, visits them, has a relationship with those people. So that's how I know. I'm like, I'm not just saying things. Like I have my little circle of friends. I guess some people might consider us still like popular because a lot of people knew us, but I don't know. To me, I just didn't think that was considered popularity. I just didn't see it. Yeah, I didn't mean for the video to be like super long, you guys. Can you believe I actually thought this was gonna be a short video? But like, I don't know. I guess I talk a lot, whatever. But that's okay because I'm trying to be as accurate as I can be with this information. This is really just for fun so you guys can get to know me a little bit better, but also so you can hear some of the perspectives of the way that things have affected me over the years, race relations wise. And I guess sometimes another thing when you grow up black in America, you forget that other people have their own problems. You forget that other races, they're not always treated the best either. You forget that there's a whole population of mixed people who are just completely unrepresented. We're not even counted as part of the groups that are being affected by racism or racial insensitivity. Like it doesn't occur to you that other people are dealing with similar things because those people aren't full black. So you just assume like, oh, it's not their problem. That's not true. And we all can help each other a little bit more and gain more unity if we as people of color in general accept that other people of color also go through discrimination, racism, and disadvantages because other people don't accept us as relevant sometimes. Also, if you are related to someone who is mixed race in your family, please consider doing more to expose those people to your family's cultural ways and like showing them ways that they can connect with you guys because we want to. Like we're not like rejecting our races. We want to belong. We want to be part of the group, but it's difficult for us to figure out where we belong or how to approach that. Like how to ask you guys, can you show me how to braid hair? Like it's embarrassing sometimes when you're around your black cousins and you're the only one that don't know how to braid. Like y'all just think it's a given. Like everyone's supposed to just know how to braid, but no, I don't know how to braid. Like that's not part of Korean culture to braid hair. That's not just something that Korean girls do for fun. You know what I'm saying? So things like that I know you guys probably just think is like, it's not even that big of a deal. But like my daughter is more black than I am. Her hair texture is coarser than mine. I gotta braid her hair. I have to put her in protective styles. I don't know how to do a lot of that stuff, you know? My sister, because she's a lot better with her motor skills than I was, she just kind of taught herself, and she was really into cosmetology, so she just learned that stuff on her own. But bro, like I used to be so embarrassed to admit to my black cousins that I did not know how to braid hair. You know what I'm saying? But that's just like a little example that I'm throwing out there. But you know, like even with cooking, like stuff that we consider like soul food, that's like normal food that our black family members just know how to make. Nobody's teaching us mixed girls how to do that stuff, not in the family. So it's like, can y'all help me out? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to connect, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to be part of the group too. But because we look different than you guys, sometimes I think you guys just think we're not interested or like it doesn't apply to us. No, we are interested, we care, we want to know too. So yeah, that's the message that I'm hoping to get across for you guys. And you know, not just on the black side, even on the Asian side, Korean family members, don't run away because some of us don't speak the language. Like I love that on my mom's side of the family, they're very accepting of my sister and me and our children's Americanness. They always have been. Even my grandfather, who was actually my step grandfather, never, ever, ever in the time that he was alive, ever did anything or said anything to differentiate between my sister and me from his other grandchildren who were full biologically related to him, because my mom is his stepdaughter. So he never treated us differently. Like he always treated us like we were his grandchildren too. And I didn't even know until I was like a teenager that he wasn't biologically related to me. But that's just because that's how it was on my mom's side of the family. Like they were always very accepting. They never judged us because we were mixed, and they never shunned us. They never treated us like we were less than because we weren't full Korean. Even my own children now who don't speak fluent Korean like I do, they don't treat my kids any differently or like they don't belong to the family because they are more Americanized. They're so accepting and so loving towards us and like proud of us, and they're always trying to find ways to like connect with us, hang out with us, be around us. My little cousin, my youngest cousin on my mom's side, shout out Jacob, he comes over to my house all the time. Like he just pops over and like hangs out with me and like talks to me, and we're like, I want to say we're like 15, maybe a little more than 15 years apart in age. He's closer in age to my son than he is to me, but he always comes over and like just totally like oh man, like we have like these heart-to-heart sessions with each other and talk about like, you know, back in the day growing up in Korea, our experiences, things like that, and connect. And he's very like, he goes out of his way to create bond and create a relationship with us. So without a shadow of a doubt, like I know I belong to this family, you know what I'm saying? But it's always been like that with them since we were children. And God blessed us to have such an accepting family who really made it easy for us to exist around them. You know, they were always very supportive of us. And so I love that about my family, and that's something that we're benefiting from every day. And I am so grateful that I'm able to experience this. I know I'm lucky. I know that this is not the experience for every person who is living the Blasian experience. But again, you know, hopefully these videos will reach the right ears and the right eyes, because I hope that those of you who are family members to people like me will take your role more seriously in connecting with us and exposing us to your culture, because we really do want to be part of the group. You know, we want to belong, we want to learn, we want to feel that connection between us and the rest of the family. So I love that, and I thank you guys for hanging out with me on this long ass video. I really look forward to hearing you guys' take on some of the things I was talking about. Go ahead and drop in the comment section if you have questions or your own opinions about some of the stuff, whether you agree or disagree and why. And I'm not going to be upset if you don't agree with everything I'm saying, but that's just my own personal opinion and experience that I'm sharing with you guys. So I hope I was able to accomplish that today, because I've been filming for way too long and I gotta pee. Okay, bye guys. I'll see you all next time on Anxiety F. My name is Gypsy. Follow me on Instagram and I will talk to you later.